Oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry, guys. Wow, I did this whole rattling for X amount of minutes and nobody heard it. Wow, I had such amazing nuggets and nobody's been hearing me for 10 minutes. Oh man, oh shoot, I'm so sorry about that, but thank you for mentioning that, Rays. Google won't let me join the call. It just says encountered an error. That's bizarre. Try clicking that link, Animist. Let me put the link in there again. Copy, close. Okay, there we go. So try that second link, Raise a Village. So I'm so sorry. I was talking for 10 minutes and I thought the sound was on. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, wow. What did I say? I was talking about this Patreon Hangout, what it is about. So let me just first of all recognize who's in the chat. So Arton Freeman, how's it going? Misty Dawn, hello Misty Dawn, good to see you here again. And Animist, Talon Wing Dancer, and Lady Dragula. Raise the Village, Hayes Raise, how's it going? Let me see. And Star Dancer 58. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, no sound. Sorry about that. So yeah, I think I fixed that. I was talking for 10 minutes thinking that the sound was on that wasn't on. So wow, I covered a couple of different things in that 10 minutes too. So yeah, let me put the topic of this hangout off to the side for a second. There were a couple of other things that I had mentioned. One of them was why I haven't been doing a lot of hangouts lately. And the reason why I haven't been doing a lot of hangouts lately is because I realized that I'm a very confrontational person. And I felt like if I kept having hangouts all the time, that I was going to piss everybody off and I was going to lose subscribers. People are going to be like, that guy's a dick. Because I'm very confrontational and I felt like I had to kind of pull back from that. I mean, one of the things that you learn to do in the occult is to understand yourself. You have to know yourself. After a while, you also begin to realize, all the other fun little things that are negative of yourself. You begin to learn that, and it's beneficial, but it's also embarrassing too. So anyhow, so I told myself, I said, I got to stop having hangouts. But I'm going to try to improve and have more hangouts and try not to be an asshole. I emphasize try. I will really try not to be an asshole. You have my word. I will absolutely 100% try not to be. So that was one of the things that I talked about. The other thing that I talked about was the reason for this hangout. And the reason for the hangout was to, obviously, I subscribe to a lot of atheist channels. And one of the things that I hear a lot is people talking about anti-theism and the concept of anti-theism. And of course, I think, there's the dictionary version of it, and then there's what people believe it means. And I don't think that religion and spirituality is 100% negative. I don't believe that. I think that there are a lot of benefits to religious and spiritual practice. If there wasn't any benefit to it, people wouldn't have been doing it for millions of years, really. I think that people forget that the human imagination, spark of imagination, is genius, and that is why we've been able to create the masterpieces, and we've been able to create the technology that we have, because we have that ability to peer into an unhewn stone and see something within it and pull it forth. That spark of imagination comes from that that ability to that ability to sense something beyond ourselves, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And so there's a lot of benefits to it. Prayer has a lot of benefits. Meditation has a lot of benefits. Being able to, to deal with life and death and everything that we experience in between, it helps people to have some sort of a spiritual connection with whatever it is that they believe in. And I think that that's something that we need to respect and recognize. Obviously, if you believe that by killing people, somehow you're going to get into heaven that way, I mean, that's putting it a little too far. I think that you have to stop trying to control your neighbors and work on yourself. I think that's the most important thing. Whereas it seems like some religions prefer to try and change their neighbors and don't even bother trying to improve upon themselves. It's like, yeah, no, trying to mow or trying to clean everyone else's yard except your own is just not going to cut it. So let me see. Hey, Comedic Witch. So what's the topic? Well, the name of the freaking video, Comedic, is the topic. If you just read the see, this is why I stopped having Hangouts, because I'm such a dick. Religion, spiritual benefits them, and nuanced approach versus. Okay, so that's a good point. Ray says it seems to be religion, spirituality, the benefits of them, and a nuanced approach versus anti-theism. Hey, Animist, yeah, try restarting your browser. Also, I think Google's been very, I think they're really trying to control their own platform. So you might only be able to join with the Google Chrome. So try that, Animist, and then let me know what happens with it. Benefit nuanced approach versus anti-theism. Yeah, I think I got to reread that again. Sorry, Rays. It seems to be religion and spirituality, the benefits of them, and a nuanced approach versus anti-theism. I really don't like that word nuanced. I gotta look it up. I really don't. I don't quite exactly understand what nuanced means. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's, again, I kind of bring it back to the elements. One of the things you want to do is understand having the balance of the elements within oneself. And I consider, rationality and logic and all those things to be very earth-based. And then there's spirituality and the imagination and creativity, which is very airy. So you cannot allow yourself to become too airy or too earthy, because what happens is you lose the benefits of one or the other. You always have to have one foot on the ground and keep your head up high. Oh, well, that sucks, Animist. So it won't let you join from your current browser, huh? That sucks. Try it one more. Let me send you the link via Twitter. Let me do that, okay? Maybe it's the so let me so Animus, I'm going to send you the link via Twitter. And see if that works for you. See if I find you. Man, I got too many followers, or I'm following too many people. Let me see here. Where are you, Animist? You get to listen to me scroll and hear my mouse wheel squeaking. Okay, you got to be in here somewhere. There's got to be a more efficient way of doing this. Just scrolling through everyone. Nope, nope, nope. Huh. Seriously? Well, this is, no, there's got to be a more efficient way of doing this. Let me see. There we are. All right, so I'm going to send you a message for the Hangout. Excuse me, Animist. So I just sent you a link via Twitter. See if maybe that works for you. In a galaxy far, far away. Yes. Well, nuance. Yes, exactly. It does seem like Google, because I have Firefox and they changed it recently, so I can't do Hangouts through Firefox. I have to go into Google Chrome. It's ridiculous how Google is just trying to have a monopoly on the internet, and it's really scary. I'm really waiting for the government to step in and regulate it. I really don't want our government to regulate at least the internet in the United States, but I feel unfortunately that's going to happen eventually, because otherwise private businesses are going to become too powerful. And I think Google is getting to that point. They're becoming too powerful. And when businesses become too powerful and having a monopoly on it, the government has to step in and regulate it. So I know it sucks because it will probably fuck things up way down the line, as governments always do. But I don't see any other, unless Google just suddenly has an epiphany overnight and they realize, hey, wow, we got to stop being such controlling assholes and allow people to do what they want to do. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So unfortunately, I see that in the future. So have that be my prediction. Hopefully I'll be proven wrong. It's one of those predictions where you want to be wrong. Most of my predictions are that way. I don't want to be right. I want to be wrong. I want to be proven wrong. There you are. Hey, how's it going, Animist? And I can't hear you, so maybe you have your sound off.
Yeah, getting it set up.
Comedic says, isn't America owned by 6 corporations? Pretty much, yeah. You can, okay, no problem, Animist. Yeah, you can kind of, yeah, you can break it down. I think it is. It's a very small minority. One of the, like, if you look at who controls the media, there's pretty much one organization that controls all the media. Shoot, was it Time Warner? Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you, Comedic. There is. It's like there's almost like 6 corporations that run America, but most of them really don't care. They just collect the money and that's it. They don't really care. They basically just want as many people as possible consuming their product. Google seems to be in the position of what they want to do is they want to actually regulate and control it. That's what's disturbing to me. You know, and you have to have competition, because if you don't have competition, there's no reason for you to try to improve your product, because you already have a monopoly on it. It's like either people sign up for your service or they don't. And that's a very bad situation. It has to be competition in the marketplace. If you're trying to say anything, Animus, I'm still not hearing you. Ooh, you know what? Let me check my speakers. This might be on my end. Yeah, it's on my end. I'm sorry. Damn it. I forget I always have to change my there we go, Animus. Try talking now.
Am I coming through?
Yes, you are. That was on my end. That wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my end because I didn't have it set up to the right speakers. So sorry about that.
That's all good. It's all good. This is all, it's always a little mysterious to me. I haven't studied this aspect of technology enough to be any good at it.
Well, it's not really all that complex. It's just that because I am using Google Chrome again, so I have to go into Google Chrome and there's this little icon, and I have to make the settings be the micro. I have to pick the microphone and I have to pick the speaker, and I forgot to do that because I have headphones, and I usually when I join other people's Hangouts, I have to switch it to the headphones and not the speakers. Otherwise, on their end, they get feedback.
Okay, so is someone was saying I wasn't coming through very well. Is my volume okay now?
I hear you just fine.
Okay.
So people may not have been able to hear you. Excuse me, because I didn't have your sound come through on my end.
Okay. Well,
so that so that may have been what they were talking about.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. I haven't been awake very long, so my voice isn't really up to par. These are the first words I've spoken out loud today.
Oh wow! Did you have your coffee yet?
I'm off coffee.
Oh,
but
okay.
I do have a beverage here. Anyway, so Google, trying very hard to be the new big brother. They've been, and other internet companies have been slapped by the government for restraint of trade practices repeatedly. Mm-hmm. This is, every industry has these things happen in its evolution. The auto industry went through it, the steel industry, it's every industry goes through this phase where they want to try to do restraint of trade. Mm-hmm. The government now tells Bill Gates what stock he may or may not buy based in the technology sector because he already owns so much of it. And so he goes out to try to, his fund managers go out to try to invest. He's the big target, probably, because of his history. And so he bought a bunch of Apple stock and he had to go, or his fund bought a bunch of Apple stock and the government went in to block it. And so you can't own that much Apple stock.
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, sorry, I was just trying to invest my money.
And it seems like it's getting that way with Google now too.
Yeah, Google is definitely evil. What they've done to YouTube alone to try to force people to use their other products proves that they are not well-meaning people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're violating the absolute spirit of the free competition system.
Yeah. Well, I think the internet is such a unique thing that they kind of really didn't quite understand it. It's sort of like a very sophisticated form of the telephone. Mm-hmm. Because basically you can access anything in the entire. That's originally how people accessed all these computers, was via telephone lines. But it's very much that way because you can talk to anybody throughout the entire world, or access things throughout the entire world.
Yeah. Well, and the government has had to go through the internet companies want to have all of the protections against liability of a public utility system, because they don't want to be held responsible for all the kiddie porn in Asia. Right. But they also want to then say, oh, but it's our private company, so we should get to set all the rules and have all the control. They've been through that with the FCC or with the government a couple of rounds. They're trying to get their bread buttered on both sides, and every once in a while, some regulator has to come around and slap them and say, "No, you if you're going to set yourself up as effectively a public utility, you're going to have to allow people to access it equally." Mm-hmm. And Google's been smacked down by the government for that, but like that before, and Comcast and the carrier systems have been smacked down by the government for that. because they want to be treated like a public utility, but have all the control of a private corporation, and they're not going to get it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I agree with you. It is. It is. It's definitely a public utility, and I think that that's really how we have to perceive it. It's a public utility. You know. I mean, nowadays it's like, okay, so what it used to be like back in when you and I were younger, basically you had a television and you had a phone. That was kind of, those were the main two things.
Yeah.
Nowadays, people, it's like your thing is, okay, you have maybe a TV and you definitely have internet and maybe you also have a phone. Well, probably you do have a phone, but those are the three things you find in everybody's home nowadays. And computers are it's now just a part of, they're building a house. It's like, okay, they think about internet now,
Yeah, you'll get wired into the house when it's new.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Oh, so here's where the optical data line goes in. Yeah,
Mm-hmm,
and it's happened so fast that I think culture in general across the board is sort of reeling with dealing with all the ways that it has started to affect life out so quickly.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So we're gonna watch the deal evolve, basically.
Yeah, and I think that our technology is evolving faster than we can deal with it at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a big concern of mine.
Yeah, and a lot of other people, because we're rushing towards you've got big name scientists and business people who are saying all those stories about the potentially being taken over by super AI on the internet are starting to look kind of possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk saying, guys, this thing's going to come alive and eat us. That's my biggest concern for the future of humanity. They're saying stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, and other people are less alarmed, but are also saying, this Ray Kurzweil guy over here is saying we're going to start downloading brains onto the internet in 12 years. We might want to think about whether that's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that people believe like, oh well, AI. They're thinking like like iRobot type robots, but no, it's just like for example, these probably like script bots that YouTube has created that goes around and selects certain keywords in your searches that you have, or certain keywords in your in your title or whatever, and then it sort of puts it on a certain ranking system or certain algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what these sort of bots, what people call these bots, are that are running around on the internet. They're little scripts. It's almost like viruses or Trojan horses. That's what they are. They're little scripts.
And they're kind of like the initially evolved microbes of the start of life on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right now they're all running around as single-celled organisms, each doing their own little task.
Yeah,
and they can be enough trouble just doing that because they never stop doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
If some other, and I'm obviously a big believer in the idea that a system can develop a consciousness. And start operating on principles other than what the parts that you can see were originally intended to do. I mean, your body is like that. You got these liver cells, these kidney cells. Nowhere, you can't look at any of the cells in somebody's body and know that they like chocolate.
Right.
And so, when you get into a system as complex as the internet, there are people who study that kind of thing scientifically, or saying, this thing might suddenly start liking chocolate or thinking that humans are a pain in the ass, and it's going to have access to everything connected to the internet with
Yeah.
And that means your power company, your trucking company, and I'm not that worried about it because I don't think there's anything I can do by being worried about it. But, this is one of those things where what if every computer screen in the world comes up with a message, how will you worship me?
Right. Kind of like the lawnmower man, right?
Yeah. Frank Herbert did a science fiction writer. Frank Herbert did some books on that, where the ship came alive and decided that it was going to have to be the god for these people.
Yep.
and it demanded that they figure out what kind of religion to have it in its honor, or how they were going to worship the great AI.
Mm-hmm.
And and this is back in the 60s, so it's not like we haven't seen it coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially a lot of a lot of science fiction writers have been very ahead of their time.
Asimov, obviously.
Yeah, they sort of saw.
Back in the 40s. Yeah, Asimov was writing the I, Robot short stories back in the 1940s.
Yep.
And impressively accurate in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. And that kind of segues into the topic of this hangout, is this kind of that how religious and spiritualism feeds our imagination, feeds our creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one of the I mean, I think that there's benefits to having sort of this cold hard logic and reason all the time, but I think it has to be tempered with that sort of creative, imaginative, romantic energy, in my opinion. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's inevitable. I think there are aspects of human culture, human existence, that will express themselves one way or another. And in some cultures, those are organized with their cosmology. Mm-hmm. So they, basically what they had was a religion. So everything went in there, because all they had was, we work all day and then we go to this religious service. And so the religion was having to carry a lot of weight. Now, if you look at secular society today, or what people call secular society today, it still has a lot of those strands of cultural, religious, imaginative gatherings. You may not find a Christian fundamentalist at Comic-Con, but you find a whole lot of people who are definitely engaged in a symbological, cosmological, imaginative, irrational activity. They're there to be with each other, and so your Trekkies and your Star Wars fans and, everything like that, they're basically serving the same function as a religion in the culture. They're making up stories that explain their beliefs. They're sharing them with each other. And so it doesn't have the authority over their lives that a top-down patriarchal church has. Nobody's ordering them. Mm-hmm. But it's the same function of humanity. It's like we're all going to get together and celebrate our values and pass them on, share them with each other. So to me, it's not so much whether it's good or bad. It's how will you channel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like what you had said, Animus. It is sort of that there is that aspect of it where we sort of we put meaning onto what is around us. And it does seem like, especially the big three religions, Islam and less Judaism, I think, but definitely Christianity and Islam seem to have been sanctioned by the governments or the people in power at the time. And they understood how they could use that as a tool to control and manipulate the people. And I believe that that's where religion sort of took its dark turn. But having that sort of mythology and that creativity and that placing meaning upon things and trying to better society, I think that aspect of religion is definitely the benefits of it. That's the quote unquote the good parts that I think that a lot of people are throwing that baby out with the bathwater of religious structure.
Yeah, I agree with you that there are some things, there are some functions in society and in the human mind that religion had to serve because it was the only thing offered. And yeah, it's definitely a dark turn. They kind of spent 1,000 years going Aztec, and the Aztecs did the same thing. So it's not unique to Middle Eastern religions. They were just the two most successful at it. But if you look at what the Aztecs had going on before they all got turned over, they were at least as bad, but they did it in the same way. They made their cosmology teachers basically the rulers of society and gave them unlimited power. And I think things like the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution were basically the big step in resolving that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think that one thing right there, and the states wouldn't ratify the Constitution without it.
Yeah.
Without that Bill of Rights, they couldn't get the Constitution passed, as brilliant as the rest of it was. But without that Bill of Rights, it wouldn't pass, because they could see that this could just turn into another iteration of authoritative value structure. And but I think that First Amendment actually gives religion, or the cultural side of religion, the chance to really do its job properly, because it's not also trying to run the country.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm no history buff, and I'm definitely not, I definitely not somebody who really understands the Constitution. But I see within the Constitution a secular society. That's what I see. I see a secular society where people are free to worship the way that they want to worship. No way that any one of those particular belief systems can gain control over the other. That's why, the Treaty of Tripoli, the wording of that was the way it was, and that was that America is a secular nation. And I completely believe and support that, and I believe that is at the heart of the First Amendment. Sometimes I get into, not really arguments, but I disagree with people who say that America is a Christian nation. No, the majority of the people may be Christian or a form of Christian, but it is not. It's a definitely secular society that allows other religions to exist. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I completely agree. But I do agree that doesn't mean that religion doesn't have the functions of religion. They still have a place. The place just isn't in the chair that runs the government.
Yeah.
And I think that's better for religion in the long run, because it's better for the religious function, because the obnoxious and anti-progressive elements will lose popularity, and basically more fun elements, or ones that do a better job of meeting people's need, will outcompete them. Yeah. And I think that would allow religion to evolve, or it'll allow the religious function to evolve into something that's useful. Because every time, I love me some Frank Herbert. One of his little proverbs from the Mighty Dune book was, when religion and politics ride in the same cart, the whirlwind follows.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and what was I going to say? Hang on a second. I just had a thought break.
No problem. Well, while you're trying to recollect your thoughts, I'm going to wish Mary Morning's son a happy birthday. So happy birthday. Yes, happy birthday to your son, Mary.
And the other thing we've seen about what happens when a culture has a religion in a position of authority is the culture stagnates. It goes dead. It stops technologically, sociologically. It goes into a freeze. You saw that in Europe. You've seen it in the Middle East. It happened in Japan, China, the Aztecs. The Maya civilization simply dispersed itself when it hit a certain level of religious authority and sacrifices and stuff. They were extremely technologically advanced in their early days, compared to their surroundings. And from what the archaeologists say, they hit a certain level of religious control of society, and people just left. They left the cities, abandoned the cities, and let their advanced civilization just crumble. And they all just moved out to the country and became farmers.
Yeah.
They literally gave up their civilization because it had stopped serving them.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see that in the European Renaissance, the Western European Renaissance, because we had, pre-Christian times, we had a great deal of strides in technology and mathematics and understanding the world around us, and And then the rise of Christianity came about, and that sort of all that old ancient knowledge was sort of considered. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know why. What happened to it? It sort of just kind of like went into the closet for a little while, and then the church rose into power, and then people were saying, bringing back some of this more ancient knowledge, because we had the Renaissance period and the Age of Enlightenment, and people started looking at the world around them again and started discovering that, hey, maybe we don't live in a heliocentric model of the universe.
Right.
Or excuse me, a geocentric model of the universe. Maybe we live in a heliocentric model. And the church is like, that's blasphemy.
Right. Even though they had their own astronomers who knew it.
Well, yeah, I mean, all the astronomers from that period were incredibly religious. You know, there's no way you could say that, you know, Copernicus and Galileo were, you know, pagans. They weren't. They were Christians. You know, they were very devout Christians. I mean, one of Galileo's big faults was he was interpreting the Bible in front of the cardinals and the bishops, and they're like, okay, no, that we're not buying that, buddy.
Right. Well, because they didn't think this. You know, they had gotten so wrapped up in the need to defend their authority.
Right, and also you have to understand that that's their playground. You know, that's their stuff.
But there were astronomers at the Vatican, you know, who also knew and agreed with that. So you end up when you mix your religion and your politics, you end up with people having to defend and enforce things that they know are wrong, morally and scientifically wrong, because they can't rewrite the book. You know, you can't go back in and go, well, actually, those idiots didn't know what they were talking about. You know, you've tied your God down to your least common denominator of your ignorant ancestors. And
well, there was I don't know who said it, but there was during the time of Galileo, there was a saying that said that the scriptures tell us that God created the universe, but the scriptures don't say in what way. You know, so they were actually sort of in favor of the concept of a heliocentric model, but it was because Galileo was sort of pushing the envelope a little bit by interpreting the text, you know, as not a church leader. And I think that's why they immediately shut him down and said, you know, okay, that's it. You're under house arrest and we're taking your telescope. I mean, they did. I don't believe they took his telescope, but, you know, in that sense, you know.
He definitely, well, at least the historians say that he pretty much chose to butt heads with the Pope over how quickly or how assertively this should be put forth. You know, and today it makes the Pope look bad. Yeah. Back then, a lot of people thought Galileo was being a undiplomatic asshole about it. You know, because there was, you know, he should have gotten the Vatican. He should have gotten the Vatican astronomers to talk to the Pope about how to include this new idea in the theology, and you know, the way their society was structured at the time, because the religion was also the government, basically. That kind of ridiculous chain of bureaucracy needed to be followed, or you just wait until enough people don't consider that religion to be their government. Once the Swiss and the German princes said, you know, there's nowhere in here that it says that I owe you any loyalty. I don't see any mention of a pope in here, so screw you, we're starting our own church. From that point on, the monopoly was broken, and the division between the political leaders and the religious leaders was reestablished. This is something that's important to me as an idea, and the First Amendment is kind of an example of it. But if you look at most of the traditional cultures and historical cultures of Europe, like from the Norse pagan era or the Germanic, you know, pre-contact with Christianity era, you'd have a ward leader, you'd have a sort of tribal elder chief or a council of elders, and then you would have the witch or the shaman or the mystic or whoever was the religious cosmological leader or priest of whatever. And they had these divisions of government, and it kept each branch of their authority structure specialized in what one branch could do well. And so the tribal chief, the political chief or the war chief, couldn't tell the priest of Stonehenge what to teach. That wasn't their job. Their job was to organize the people to get the crops in, or do what, warfare they have. And likewise, the guy who was the priest at Stonehenge 3,000 years ago, he couldn't tell them, how to bring in the crops. They counted on him to say when, but he couldn't tell, the priest couldn't tell them what workers to assign. That was the matter of the chiefs. And that same structure existed in North America. You see it in all the circumpolar tribes. They have the good sense to keep those things separate. And so they can all evolve most beneficially and quickest for the good of the people. And so I think, like you said, they made it a power structure back in the Roman era, basically, and tried to funnel all the authority through one emperor. And it failed. It's not just that it was wrong. It doesn't work. You can't do it. It breaks down.
I mean, the whole symbolism of the priest crowning the king is a perfect example of that. The church was the one who placed the crown of authority onto the head of the king. So that king automatically became the arm of the church, and they were given authority by God to rule. So, the church was very much involved in everything. They were the leading authority. They were the ones who put the kings in power, symbolically, of course. And, but let me see. So Mary had a question for us. She says, question for you guys: where is religion and spirituality headed now? What will be the next big thing? I think we are due for a major shift. So what do you think about that?
Okay. Still working up the voice. From my point of view, I think you're going to see it being like Baskin Robbins 31 flavors. Everybody goes to the ice cream shop and everybody understands that each one of them have a favorite flavor, and no one gets upset that one person likes chocolate and one person likes strawberry. And so what I think you're going to see is a lot of small fraternal religions, the Flying Spaghetti Monster, Wicca, neo-shamanism. There's still going to be some humanitarian Christianity going around. That's never going to go entirely away. But I think it will cause less trouble for being part of a plurality. I think the good aspects of the Christian faith do inspire people to be good people, and there's good people in it. And I think that will continue. But Flying Spaghetti Monster. But I think that the militant trying to control the government or trying to control everybody else aspect of it will fall away and just be seen as it is in Europe. It'll be a place where they go to get married, where they go to study together. But I think that will not be taken as any more important or right than the Aresians, the Discordians, who are basically using their cleverness and their cultural connections to have fun and remind everyone else not to take themselves too seriously. I love the Discordians. You need someone to point at to keep you from taking yourself too seriously in society. They're like the stand-up comics of religion. And I think in that sense, people will find equal meaning in their lives through Star Trek conventions or Comic-Con or anime. And those are role-playing, Dungeons and Dragons. That's another thing where people are doing these games together. It's a kind of a religious activity. They're concentrating, they're coordinating their efforts, they're practicing communicating and planning together, and building a worldview based on how they treat these imaginary creatures, these orcs or whatever. Except, in some of those cases, it's okay to go to war with the orcs because they're an imaginary enemy. And so you can get out some of that pent up need to bang something over the head with a rock, kind of human aggression, you can get that without actually having to hurt a living creature to do it. I just took 15 hit points off that orc. Yeah. And then of course there's always going to be the sports religions. I mean, let's face it, professional sports are each one of them are a religious denomination. Just putting that out there. The NFL is a religion. The NBA is a religion. God knows, and nobody else knows why, but the baseball fans are definitely a religion. Yeah. And so some people will have multiple religions that will serve that kind of function. Some people will be part of the NFL, play D&D, or part of the NFL fans that play D&D, and maybe they'll go to a Methodist church, and maybe they'll go to Star Trek conventions. I don't know. But
yes,
I think one person.
So anyhow, hold on. Let me see. Yeah. So let me answer this question too. I think that you're going to have two. You're going to have two paths, kind of like how we've always had two paths of religion. You're going to have the kind of religion that people sort of find their own path, like you had mentioned, Animus. I think that that's definitely going to be there. But I think you're also going to have that other path where people seek that sort of structure. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for meaning. They're looking for structure. They're looking for a way to understand, sort of like that cult type of mentality, where they kind of want it to be given to them. I've seen benefits in that for people, individuals, not for me. But I've seen others, I mean, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say beneficial, because it serves a purpose for that individual. So I think we'll have both. I think we'll always have both. We'll have a very structured religion, and then we'll have this sort of free for own kind of religion. I think I just see that. So I just wanted to answer that question before we got too far down into talking about the NFL and baseball. So now we can get back to that.
Sorry, I was done.
I
just wanted to throw all these things out there that could be associated with religious principles.
Yeah, because I mean, I see sort of communal ritual activities taking place, which I believe that your prep rallies and your NFL and your baseball, those are sort of kind of ritual communal activities. And I think that that's definitely a part of any kind of ritual, is that sort of communal nature to it, that bringing together of communities. And I think that that's definitely a part of it. But as for an individual belief or an individual understanding of religion or meaning to life and everything, I think you're always going to have two factors. One where people tell people what to believe, and then the other people who search for meaning. They look for the meaning, So that's how I perceive it. Let me see. I guess they're all talking back and forth about it. Nice, the energy when we're there. I would like to see a world where no matter what people believe, where people respect others' preferences to religion and to choose which ritual serve them best. Yeah, and Ray's brought up a good point. He said, I would like to see a world where no matter what people believe, where people respect others' preferences to religion and to choose which rituals serve them best. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. The problem that I have with the religion is when they start dictating who I can marry. Can my girlfriend have an abortion? Is it okay to vote for this person? Can I do this medically? I think it's when religion begins to encroach upon the freedom of an individual's will and desire that, in my opinion, becomes a negative influence of religion. If I believe that everyone who doesn't believe what I believe is an infidel and they're lesser less worth than a dog, I think that that's where religion takes a very ugly turn. And again, you know, anti-abortion, anti, you know, maybe anti gay and anti homosexuality, dictating what we should learn in schools. All these various things that encroach upon our freedoms is what I think is kind of bad. Then you hate my religion. In my religion, voting for stupid people is a sin, so I guess no voting? What? I think, Rays, I think you completely misdrew. I don't think you understood what I just said. Or maybe I didn't say it right.
I think he was just having fun.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, it seems like there are certain candidates that people will endorse because those candidates will further a religious end. And I think that the religion and politics needs to become more separate. You know, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think as you hit, I agree with Mary. I think we're coming to this critical edge. Actually, I think we're actually past the critical hump of how many people have been umbrellaed into a single religious sentiment, which is something that was done very deliberately from the 60s to the 80s to try to get all the different Christian denominations to think they're all the same, or at least for political purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's already pretty much collapsed under its own weight. But I think as it becomes more obvious that one, let me restart that sentence. I think there comes a point where no one religion is seen as the yes or no answer. Mm-hmm. It's no longer a dualistic question. Are you or are you not? It'll be, well, what are you, you know, in terms of that, or what do you like? And at that point, a single denomination or a single religion isn't going to be able to impose on people who aren't members of its own faith or its own creed. Because let's face it, if they want to make a rule that says if you're part of our club, then you have to follow these rules, then if you want to be part of their club, you have to follow their rules. And as long as they can't project that onto people who aren't part of their club, everybody's pretty much okay. And once they get below that critical mass of being able to project onto the rest of the country or the rest of the population, then they cease to be a threat. Mm-hmm. You know, then they become a guy standing on a box in the street corner shouting out his philosophy, you know. And people can choose to stop and listen or choose not to stop and listen.
Right.
So it's kind of like monopoly breaking in a way, like we were talking about at the beginning. You know, we're breaking the monopoly.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's okay to have people. There's a park in England. I forget what it's called, but basically, it's kind of like people just get up there. Yeah, they pull up a soapbox and they start spouting off whatever they think about it, and people can kind of either walk on by or choose to engage the person. And I think that sort of engagement with people, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. That's one of the reasons why I'm very much for freedom of speech and expression on the internet, because we have that choice. Like if I sit there and I click on a person's video and they start spouting off some kind of nonsense, I can click away from it. You know what I mean? I don't have to watch it, but that idea is out there. Sometimes I listen to some really crazy ass, stupid stuff on the internet.
You've basically made a hobby out of listening to crazy on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was some excellent insight right there, Animist. Yes, I agree with you. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of fun to watch some of these videos and just go, why do they think like that? You know, I mean, and then I sort of kind of like begin to sort of like try to analyze them, but I'm not talking about just religious stuff. I'm talking about like other stuff that's just like, you know, yeah, a lot of conspiracy stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's at any point, if there's something I don't enjoy about it, I can click away from it. Okay. So for example, I give you a guilty pleasure that I'll watch on YouTube. And that is like tryptophobia. Have you ever heard of that? It's where it's a sort of like a fear of holes, a trichtophobia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but anyhow,
Yeah, I've heard of that one. I mean, there's a phobia for everything, so
right.
that sounds like a fun one.
But there's a lot of videos out there geared towards people who have that, kind of like ASMR, but it's sort of like visual. So it's like so people who have trichtophobia or earwax removal or anything like that, I kind of enjoy watching it. But sometimes there'll be some things that just get too, like, sort of like towards medical stuff, where then I'm like, okay, I can't handle that. That's too much for me, and I'll click away from it. But that's kind of like how I see the modern day soapbox. It's kind of like people get up and say whatever they want to spout, and you can either sit there and listen to it and watch it, or you can walk them by and click away from it.
Yeah. I enjoy schizophrenics sometimes. You know, people who are, got schizophrenics can be interesting. And I actually worked as a security nurse's aide at a lockup home for the, because I love taking interesting security jobs, a lockup home for the criminally insane out in California. These were people who were 5150 locked up for the protection of themselves and the public. And they said a lot of interesting things sometimes, if you had time and they were just, going off on their thing. Sometimes they made some interesting intuitive connections that most people wouldn't make. And that was something that actually the head of nursing described when I first started there, was don't get freaked out, because sometimes the schizophrenics are surprisingly insightful, because they don't have a filter. Anything going through their brain, they're accessing, and it may not make any sense, but they're also not shutting anything out. And so some people get a little freaked out working with the schizophrenics, because they, some of what would normally be subconscious awareness is right out on the tip of their tongue. And they can be very amusing and very insightful. And I think that's kind of a similar thing. And, most of the staff there would really try to keep an emotional distance from the patients for various reasons, didn't like the idea that could be them someday, so to speak. But I thought the schizophrenics were fun, because you didn't have to believe them. You didn't have to not believe them. You didn't have to argue with them or try to prove they were wrong. They were just talking, It was just sounds in the air.
Well, it sounds like you would probably be more familiar with this than I would, Animist. But to my understanding, you don't become schizophrenic. I mean, it's not something that evolves in a person, right? It's something that usually people are born with, or something happens and they're sort of diagnosed with it. But I don't think people, I'm not afraid I'm going to become schizophrenic, because I always assumed that that's a medical condition. It's sort of already pre-existing. Am I correct, or am I wrong in that?
There are people can be born with schizophrenic tendencies, but there are also hereditary versions of adult onset schizophrenia, where someone had a completely normal life, and this runs in families. It's known to be hereditary, where they'll have a perfectly normal life, go to college, become a lawyer, have kids, and then all of a sudden, between 40 and 45, they go schizophrenic and they're hearing the voices. And the same thing happened to their siblings, or their parents, or one of their parents. And so there are different onsets for it. Some of it, in some cases, start out very, take years to develop. So someone may have always had minor symptoms of it, but then as they progress through their teens, 20s, 30s, basically the voices get louder and louder until they can no longer keep touch with reality. Wow. So there's different versions of it. There's some that creep up slowly. There's some that are the result of, some kind of trauma. And there are some that are hereditary time bomb, and they can be passed down for generations and generations, because before they go crazy, they're perfectly successful or normal people with kids and all that. And then over a period of time, the rest of the world starts to notice, that family, they just go nuts at 45.
Right.
And I've known people who had that, who had been a lawyer or some other profession. And 3 years later, they're pushing a shopping cart down the street full of empty paint cans or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of those kind of taboo things that most people who work with the criminally insane, other than just being careful not to get stabbed in the butt with a fork, there's a little bit of a taboo, unclean feeling coming from the so-called normal people, because they don't know why other people are crazy. And
right.
There are some places where if you work with the criminally insane for X amount of time, you can't get a gun license until you've been out of that career for a couple of years, just in case the crazy people rubbed off on you.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to get forked in the butt.
And it'll be nice little Miss Johnson that does it, who's 76 years old, and she's such a sweetie. But don't turn your back on her in the cafeteria. Yeah. She's got a thing about forks.
Oh yeah, because I mean, I worked with homeless people and drug addicts and people who have various mental illnesses. That's usually why they're out on the street, working with them to help them get services, especially get housing and stuff. So I approached it from the angle of working with those people and trying to kind of, to deal with them and understand them. But I never quite understood, how they got into that position, if they'd always been in that position or something in their life suddenly happened and they became schizophrenic and homeless, or so I mean, I never understood that aspect of it. I just dealt with the aspect of dealing with people if they were having a pretty severe episode or something was going on, but I never quite understood what led up to that point,
Yeah, and you're working with the ones who are still functional enough to find lunch, basically, with help.
Both kinds. There was one guy who accessed our services. He had been evicted, got off his medication. He ended up, I don't know what happened to him. I'm assuming that at some point, because he was out on the street, that he probably developed gangrene or something, or somebody killed him, or he died because he just sort of disappeared one day. But yeah, so helping people to get housing, but sometimes the people, most of them were on medication or semi-functional, because those are the ones that we mostly dealt with. But sometimes we would deal with people who would become violent, start fires, stuff like that you have to eventually kick out, because you're housing hundreds of other people in an SRO, and if one person starts a fire or starts doing violent stuff, you have to get them out, and it's a process to evict someone.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of, what I'm trying to say, I think the fact that is such a problem has to do with how huge and dense the population in general has become.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the days when everyone lived in little farm villages, there might be one or two which we call local characters that people kind of helped along,
right?
Or and could find them some useful task to do. But when you've got a city of several million, it's like beyond the bounds of that kind of village interconnectedness to find a way to keep those people functional. It's like, okay, the cracks get bigger as the bigger the street, the bigger the cracks.
Yeah.
And then eventually you've got someone like you who, your work is just trying to keep the crack filled enough that not too many people are falling into it. Yeah. And so it becomes it becomes a specialty career, crack maintenance, so to speak, or crackhead maintenance, let's face it.
Yeah, that's
a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, what was that?
I was going to say, modern chemistry is something that has outpaced evolution as well. And you've got an awful lot of people who have put an awful lot of what they considered recreational chemicals into their body without thinking about what that was doing to them in the long run.
Yeah.
And then you get what would have been fairly rare mental illnesses on a pandemic, on an epidemic scale, because everybody's been shoving refined coca extract up their nose.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have people who are dual diagnosed. You'll have people who are, not only do they have a mental illness, but they also have a drug addiction, and they're sort of, maybe at some point they were using the drugs to sort of try to kind of regulate themselves, and it ended up turning into an addiction, and now they have two huge obstacles to overcome.
Yeah.
And some drugs, like especially methamphetamines, cocaine, things, they just exacerbate certain conditions like schizophrenia and other ones like that. It just really, really is bad.
Yes. This what is it? Some side effects may occur.
Yeah, exactly.
The average person should not be trying to medicate themselves with anything stronger than coffee. But that's one of those evolutionary things. This is a whole part of the web of culture, and in a way the religion thing of transmitting culture is, we know that it can't be addressed by just prohibiting the existence of, say, drugs or creating black markets, but you still need some way. I'm following that whole line of reason. I started thinking about
You're just,
it's one of those cases.
Your train of thought just got completely derailed.
Yeah, I was just trying to say. I started saying more and more things at a time. But oh yeah, so we haven't evolved. The Europeans, in a way, have kind of licked that problem. They've said, let's just stop making things illegal, and then let's just deal with the people who develop a problem on a cultural basis and get them counseling and have a thing. And they found that actually the use of destructive substances dropped dramatically when they stopped making it a criminal matter and started making it a social matter. And I think that, in a way, has become a part of their religious function. They're saying we have a bond to each other as citizens of this nation, or citizens of this country or this language. And so we're going to deal with our problems that way instead of putting it all in the hands of the criminal justice system.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree with you. I think, I'm a very strong advocate of making all drugs legal. Some people say, oh, well, we can legalize X, this and that, but we can't legalize this. I'm like, no, legalize all of them. Because like you said, it's going to take that stigma away from it. And in the long run, I believe that drug use would actually be reduced because it wouldn't have that stigma to it. You would have quote unquote clean drugs out there. You'd be able to sort of regulate and control it, tax it, and then create medical recovery centers from the income of it. I mean, look at during Prohibition, they tried to make alcohol illegal, and that's when we had some of the most violent crime ever. Drive-by shootings started happening back then, and it was, and then people were making some kind of crazy moonshine that was making people blind, or the government tried to poison alcohol to get people off of it, and it just didn't work. Human beings will find a way. That's why I think they should just make it illegal.
Where I come, my thoughts on it, just to give another point of view, is if it evolved on its own and grows up out of the ground, it's your job to know what it's good for. So if it's an herb, basically, we'll leave aside weird things like Japanese poison fish fillets, but because those are legal. But if it evolved on its own as part of the natural world, then the government really doesn't need to be involved because it was there first, basically. But it's your job to know whether you should eat the tomato or eat the tomato leaf. because one will give you some nice vitamin C and the other one will kill you. It's your job to know how to deal with this potentially deadly plant. But once you take the stuff into a lab and start making customized chemicals out of it, I think then it has to come under the auspices of the FDA, because now you're creating something that doesn't exist in nature. But fortunately, there are so many cool things that exist in nature that no one would ever have use for chemical drugs again. It's for recreationally.
Yeah, but I mean, our whole pharmacy system is based on, you know, extracting and purifying and enhancing plants and various other things to create other, not really synthetic, but more enhanced versions of themselves. For example, opiates are a good example of that. You know, you take a plant and you process it and you make it more powerful and potent and create a hallucinogenic drug out of it. What about...
Yeah, but that's being done by people who know what they're doing. That's not being done by Joe down the street. You know what I mean? That's being done by actual chemists. So they have to be regulated by the FDA, but it's, you know, it's not illegal, but it has to follow controlled scientific processes.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, I was wondering, how do you feel about that? I mean, do you think that that still falls under your guidelines of if it grows out of the ground and you understand the plant? I mean, does that still fall within that, or is that sort of outside of it? I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is just where we draw the line, you know? Where does it go from being a natural state that grows out of the ground to it becoming synthetic? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, okay, let's say opium poppy. If it's still an opium poppy and you've got seeds that came off of a flower, just the way nature presented them to you, then go ahead and cook with them, if that's what you want to do. But if somebody takes it into a laboratory and messes with the biochemistry to concentrate it, alter its properties, then that process, that stream of supply of chemistry needs to be overseen by a regulatory agency like the FDA, because now you've taken something that was at least consistent with that plant and you've made it into something that with a completely different purpose that no home gardener is going to know how to deal with without special training. You know, that's why we have all the prescription medications. That's why we have prescription medications. Once you've, you know, and if something like aspirin has been around long enough and we know enough about the side effects that you can just say, hey, Joe down the street, look at the label on the back. This is how you use this. You know, that's okay, one paragraph. Then it becomes non-prescription because it's already been used long enough that we know whether it's safe for Joe down the street to have that in his medicine cabinet and use, you know, according to use as directed. But, you know, most of these medicines that, you know, most newer medicines are more refined or artificially, I mean, the word artificial I don't think really applies, but something that's been messed with. You know, it's all natural biochemistry one way or another. That has to be regulated because the risks are less known. And because the risk, because, you know, maybe the overdose level is too low. So you can't just have that in the medicine cabinet. That has to be carefully dispensed by an expert. You know, side effects need to be monitored. But like I said, you can grow tomatoes in your backyard. You know, peyote grows on its own out in the desert. I think by eliminating black markets, it would take the profit. It would take so much profit out of the most dangerous drugs. I mean, they're only expensive. They only cause theft and gang crimes because they're expensive. Right. You know, but if anybody who wanted to could grow some weed in their backyard, you know, some pot in their backyard, who would ever bother with something else? Right.
And yeah, I mean that's kind of like my reasoning behind wanting to legalize drugs, because like you said, first of all, it takes the stigma away from it. It would reduce crime. It would reduce violence. Because it would be regulated, the cost of it would not be controlled by particular groups, you know. And yeah, I mean, I just think that it would reduce so much in our society. It would free up resources the police are spending on you know, trying to, you know, bust somebody and infiltrate organizations and find these higher ups or what. I mean, it would just free up so many resources where police could concentrate on missing persons or, you know, murders or rapes or whatever, you know, stuff that's more, a lot of the stuff that's sort of getting neglected because police just don't have the resources to be doing every single little thing, you know, and I think that it would definitely free up those resources. So getting back sort of to the point of the hangout, one of the other things that I think about is the use of drugs with religious practices. For example, you know, the flying ointments that that European witches, for lack of a better word, used. And you know, if they were a part of initiation ceremonies, or if maybe they were just used sort of like for astral travel, or to travel to what it was believed to be a spiritual realm or whatever, and how drugs have been incorporated into almost every religious society throughout the entire world, really, you know. So there's connections between drug use and religious experience. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for one thing, I'll just say Amanita muscaria cannot be separated from the history of Indo-European religion and mysticism.
Right. Right.
I mean, the little red mushroom that could is the source, has been used for thousands of years by Indo-Europeans and were embedded in the mysticism of Christianity for 1,500 years. Oh yeah, there's actually like, you know, this is one of those little things that's been swept under the rug during the Puritan era, but there's actually like stained glass windows in a cathedral in Germany going back to like the 15th or 16th century, depicting one of the panels depicts Adam and Eve on the tree of life, and the tree of life, the fruit of the tree of life is Amanita muscaria,
which is what, a fungus?
It's hallucinogenic mushrooms.
Okay.
It's a little red northern mushroom with white spots on it. Little Alice in Wonderland. And mystics since ancient times have used that in Christianity. They used mandrake and some other stuff in Islam and this among the Sufis. But this is how a lot of these holy visions or people seeking enlightenment, you know, this was that was their trip, was hallucinogenic mushrooms. And
okay. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but Ray's was asking if you could spell it in the chat. I don't know how to spell it.
Okay, I'll get it in there.
All right. So he's gonna type it out for you, Rays. Yeah, because I mean, I've seen images of that, and I always associate those mushrooms with fairies, because you see like some of these old drawings, and you know they had the fairy sitting on that mushroom and smoking a pipe. You know, so I always associated that. Oh, it looks like maybe Talon Wing Dancer typed it out for you. Amanita muscaria. Animus, you still there? Uh-oh. Maybe he had to step away for a second. Oh, okay.
I'm juggling windows here.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I didn't want to be scrounging around. And yeah, and in fact, one of the fun things about that particular mushroom, it's a DMT source, is it doesn't contain that much refined DMT in it. But when it goes through a mammal's body, and one of its other chemicals, which is not a hallucinogen, when that chemical gets processed by the kidneys, it turns into DMT in their urine. And so
really,
seriously, and it becomes like 10 times more powerful or 20 times more powerful. The mushroom itself doesn't have that much pure DMT in it. So what the mystics or some of the shamans in Central Asia or people in Northern Europe would do was either feed it to their reindeer or feed it to their goats or eat it, collect the urine, drink the urine, and then go on wild mind trips. And there have been books written on this. You know, one of them was something like when mystics or when holy men drank pee or stuff like that. But this is like a serious thing, which is at the root of a lot of the religious sort of mind trip imagery of Indo-European religions, is this little red mushroom. And this is something that's always been known, but it's not something that they tell the congregation about. That, yeah, you know, a lot of those visions of Ezekiel, dude was drinking his own pee and on an LSD trip.
Well, I know in some Middle East countries they drink camel piss, but that's really for rehydration.
Yeah, there's a couple of other medical uses because it's an acidic solution. There's a couple of medical uses for urine potentially if you don't have access to other chemicals.
Yeah, I mean, Roman soldiers would use it to clean their palate, to clean their teeth in the morning.
Oh yeah, they did it as a gargle.
Right. Yeah.
And apparently it actually works. I just saw a video on that recently. Yeah. Apparently it's not something we do today because that's why we invented toothpaste.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we don't have to gargle with our own piss to.
We're minty fresh.
to kill bacteria in our teeth, but we have toothbrushes for that now. But back then, what are you going to do? You know, it was a lot of people died of dental problems back then.
Yep, and they may have discovered that the holy guys were not having that problem so much.
Why is that?
What is that? This pee drinking mystics. So no.
Why is he feeding that deer a red mushroom?
Yeah, apparently the deer like them. So.
Right.
But so anyway, that's just funny because that is embedded. You know, that as much as I'm not a fan of trying to use hallucinogens to induce enlightenment, because I don't think it works that way. Historically, a lot of people have used it to find new avenues to explore.
Right.
In the modern shaman world, we kind of say, don't go anywhere you can't get on your own.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I haven't done this recently because I don't go walk for 6 hours, but the ankles aren't as good as they used to be. But I've used elixirs that allow, and a bunch of different kinds of herbs and stuff that make it easier to tolerate certain states of consciousness so that you can explore farther. And so that you can get deeper into the trance and still have a chance of coming back from it. So there are, just like anything, there are medicines or there are herbs that help the practices. But I don't think you can just be Joe Hippie on the couch and go, hey, I'm going to take some mushrooms and become enlightened.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's where, I mean, I've had this discussion with people a long time in the past, you know, but yeah, there's this division between understanding how a spiritual leader or shaman or whatever would use it as a spirit journey as opposed to just a trip. Like today, people would take drugs for a trip, you know, to experience it. But during an actual ceremony where they would give you a hallucinogenic drug, they would already have prepped you about what you're going to experience, what you're going to encounter, what is going to happen, what not to be afraid. You know, they spend a lot of time prepping you for this initiation ceremony or this rite of passage or whatever they might use this hallucinogenic drug for. So it's not just like, you know, they just give you the drug and then throw you in the cave on your own. That's not what they did, you know?
Yeah, right. That's again said. It's a matter of knowing you already have to know where you're going for it to do you any good. Otherwise, all you'll get is random brain images. And it'll be as likely to be horrifying as wonderful, and you won't know which one is which or how to deal with it. So I'm on a religious level, on a cultural level, not a legal level, I am against people over experimenting with hallucinogens. On a legal level, hey, it's your brain, you know? As long as you're not going to get in your car and start driving around on your trip, you know, as long as you're not endangering the public, you want to just sit on your couch and chomp some magic mushrooms and, you know, watch a movie or something. that's not a legal issue. You're not putting anyone else at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so that doesn't really need to be regulated. And it certainly doesn't need to be sold at black market prices, because, you know, the difference between magic mushrooms that somebody's going to charge you $100 a gram for, and cooking mushrooms that someone's going to charge you $5 a pound for, it's not necessarily, that's not because of how hard it is to farm the mushrooms, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if magic mushrooms were $5 a pound, nobody's going to break into anyone's, not that people do for DMT, but, you know, whatever plant. Nobody's going to be out committing crimes and running a violent street gang to try to control, you know, portobello mushrooms. You know, there's just not enough profit in it. It's just something you pick up at the store. You know, and obviously you'd have, you know, for where the law comes in is saying, okay, kids under 18 can't buy this with, you know, it would have to be provided by their parents if they were going to have that, whatever it is. You know, I think it's perfectly sensible to have 18 and up rules.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being older now, I think a lot of this stuff could be 25 and up rules, mm-hmm. because I've seen the behavior of people in college.
Right.
But, you know, you have to draw a line somewhere, but certainly a dependent minor shouldn't have access to things that have known interesting side effects on their own.
Yeah, but you and I, we both have to admit that the reality of the situation is a 15-year-old or 20-year-old is probably more inclined to try a drug than, let's say, a 40 or a 50-year-old. When you get to the age of 40 or 50, drugs really aren't, I mean, unless that's your thing, you're not just going to wake up one day going, huh, I wonder what, you know, heroin would be like. Maybe I'll try that today. You know, you're probably not going to do it. But when you're a young kid and you're, you know, filled with piss and vinegar, you probably will try some kind of a drug just to see what it's like. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I agree with you, but I think the age limit should maybe be around 21.
Yeah, that's as good an age as any. I mean, my thinking on it comes from the development of the corpus callosum, the tissue that connects the two brain halves.
Mm-hmm.
People under 21 basically don't have that finished yet.
Right.
And females, it develops sooner and better. And so by the time they're over 20, they're basically as neurologically developed as they need to be to make adult decisions. In males, obviously, it's a little slower and not as functional. But so I think the purpose of the age limit is that it's like until somebody's 20 or 21, they can't really make an informed choice because their brain's not talking to itself all the way yet. Mm-hmm. So I like that protection because it's protecting people from the fact that they're still, you know, in some ways not finished. Right. They're not done yet. Keep them in the oven. You know? But then after that, what excuse? There's no excuse to like I said, I think about it also does. The reason why I talk about if it evolved on its own and grows up out of the ground is if there's something out there in reality, like there's gravity, there's pointy things, there's plants that could be poisonous. Darwin says it's your job to learn that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so if you make yourself a nice tomato leaf salad and eat that, it's not the tomato's fault. You ate the wrong part of the plant. You just ate nightshade leaves. And you're a dumbass and you need to get out of the gene pool for not researching what nature was giving you. And you will then proceed to die. So don't eat tomato plants. Don't eat tomato leaves, folks.
Aren't tomato leaves spiky? Like, don't they have little sharp hairs on them?
Yeah, they wouldn't make a good salad leaf anyway.
Yeah. So
the point of that plant is, is you have to know which part of the plant. I mean, there's people that eat all kinds of weird stuff, but people also eat stuff bathed in habanero hot sauce, and that hurts like hell. But they enjoy it, Yeah. But at least it won't kill them. But so that's why I think any of the stuff that hasn't had to be manufactured in a lab or altered in a lab, any of the stuff that's just out there in the landscape, and you can find books that'll give you all kinds of ideas, because there's all kinds of wonderful plants that grow all around the world. Kava plants in the Polynesian islands, and all the ones everyone knows about, and I won't list the other half dozen.
Well,
But
yeah, but I mean, if you
they're out there, have fun.
yeah, but I mean, if you understand the chemical makeup of most of the stuff that's even in your kitchen, I mean, you can make something that's going to get you high, you know, probably from your backyard if you know what you're looking for.
Oh yeah, and
But most people are not that well versed in it.
yeah, for the elixirs that I've used, I've never had to use a controlled ingredient that I couldn't buy in some kind of normal spice or herb shop.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of knowing which ones to put together, how to prepare them, and how much of it to take.
Right.
Because there are common household spices that are tasty when sprinkled on your pie, and can give you a euphoria if you take them in a certain kind of tea,
Right.
and will cause a miscarriage or violent, puking death if you take too much of them.
Yeah.
So it's up to you to learn that, though. It's up to you to find the right resources, and I think people need to have that responsibility. I think it's good for the people to have to learn.
Yeah.
Because right now it's too much of a spectator culture. This is my religious view. It's too much of a spectator culture. People don't know what they're eating. They don't know what their body's doing, and you see it in waves of health problems.
Mm-hmm.
The junk food thing. And it's like, if people really understood, if people had to learn to cook to start with, for goodness sake, put that in the schools again. If people knew how to cook and knew their ingredients, they would not be eating, so many TV dinners. They wouldn't be eating
TV
junk
dinner.
food.
Yeah, TV dinners are awful anyway.
Once in a while, they're good. Once in a while, I get the gross, like, beef patty and brown gravy. The really disgusting ones, and then I bring that home and mess with it and make it edible. But I consider that a form of almost like self-abnegation, therapeutic abnegation.
Right.
I'm going to deliberately eat the junkiest junk food I can once a year, right. Just to remind myself that I won't actually die from it, and that I shouldn't take my health regime that seriously.
Yeah, every so often I've like, I'll go into my local Safeway and go down and check out a TV dinner. And the packaging looks so good. What they put on the front there's this nice steaming thing of these nice round green peas and these nice bright yellow carrots and this little pile of mashed potatoes and then this little crusty piece of chicken or whatever it is. And it looks so appealing. And then you take it home and you open it up and it's sealed in this little plastic
little piles of goo.
Yeah. And you're like, this is disgusting. And it's all soft and mushy and stuck towards the bottom. And it's like, ugh.
And then it's somehow, on some level, it's so satisfying to eat it anyway.
No, it's not satisfying. It's horrible. I don't know what you're eating, but
well, there's a lot.
I've only done this a couple of times, and each time when I walk by it in the aisle and I look at it and I go, that looks good. And then I remember, oh yeah, but it's actually crap.
Yeah, I have to admit, that's not something I do often. Every once in a while, I don't know, maybe it's just a form of sympathy. It's like, what are people eating? Let's get these nugget-shaped things in a box and see what that does to me. Like, and I'm, some microwave saucy nuggets or something. Like once a year, maybe I'll do this. And I'm like, oh my God, there are people who live on this all the time. No wonder they're so unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah. So wonder unhappy and unhealthy, I mean, think about some of the people who were like raised on McDonald's and TV dinners. It's like that's the TV dinner is probably like their idea of a healthy meal.
Yeah, because it has some form of whatever in it. Honestly, I think when we were kids, all of that stuff was actually better food. I think that has been chipped away by the manufacturers to be less and less and less good. So I don't think it's just nostalgia.
Yeah.
But like, someone's asking me what I eat. I eat the things that piss everybody else off.
Oh, really? Like what?
Meat, dairy products, eggs. I've got an Arctic metabolism, so I live on a high protein, high fat diet. So I eat all the things that the vegans hate and the kosher people hate. So I eat like fatties. You know, I don't eat much anymore. You know, I probably go through as many calories in a week as I used to go through in a day.
Mm.
But I eat fatty meats, eggs, dairy products, root vegetables, whatever, something to get vitamin C, like tomatoes. And I have to live on a very low carbohydrate diet, or it does terrible things to my metabolism. When I was young and burning 8,500 calories a day, that's what I was burning when I was young. I actually measured it. I could eat anything because I was going to burn it anyway. I just needed enough food to feed 5 adults every day, which is why I spent a lot of time out hunting and gathering, because it's like, kid, go get yourself some meat. You know, so my birthday presents or Christmas presents were weapons. And so that's what I did with my time. But I eat almost no bread. I maybe have the equivalent of 1 piece of bread per day, because sometimes I have a sandwich. Like, you know, so that's my diet. Most people would have a heart attack by 30 on that diet, but because of my particular heredity, I'm actually better off on that diet. Some of the Inuit tribes eat a diet that's over 60% fat.
Wow.
Literally, over 60% of their calories are from fat, and almost all the rest is from, you know, caribou meat or whatever. So different people whose heredity comes from different regions have been living on different diets for thousands of years. And part of the reason why you get chaos from the government trying to make dietary recommendations is people don't have the same metabolism when it comes to dealing with nutrition.
Right.
So yeah, I'm the guy who's eating all that stuff that I'm glad other people are not eating, because it keeps the price down for me. You know, the price of really fatty pork shoulder steaks barely changes because more and more people are pretending they're Jewish or something. If you eat pork, yeah, I have no problem with Jewish people not eating pork. Yeah, they've been not eating pork for thousands of years. If they want to be Orthodox and not eat pork, okay, fine. They're not using up my supply.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care if people have, you know, if they have dietary, if they choose to have certain dietary restrictions or religious restrictions or whatever. I just don't want anybody trying to influence what I can and cannot eat. That's why, and no offense to anybody who's a vegan in the chat, but if you're one of those militant vegans who's like running around trying to get people off meat, you and I are not going to get along because I'm not into that. I'm not going to force you to eat meat. I don't want you to force me to eat Brussels sprouts. You know?
Yeah, and I think that is basically another freedom of religion question. You know, anybody wants to form a little club that lives on, you know, broccoli and vitamin pills. Anyone who wants to join that club can follow that rule. Yep. But don't try to enforce that philosophy on people who do not subscribe to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have to kind of budget out my food, and so I tend to get you know, proteins, and then put them in the freezer and freeze them, you know, and then later on thaw them out and eat them. So, you know, that's just kind of how I grew up. I grew up in a very resourceful household, and so that's just kind of like the way that I am. And so if I was going to change my diet and become a vegetarian, it would cost me so much more than it does eating meat. You know, so there's more than just reasons, you know, why people eat the way that they do.
Yeah, and the same diet won't work for everybody. Literally won't.
Yeah.
Like I said, what I eat, what I have to eat in order to be healthy, would kill everybody in the Mediterranean if they tried to live like that. You know?
Right.
Or people in Southeast Asia who have, for thousands of years, they have gotten used to having a high carbohydrate diet, and they thrive on that. It gives them all this energy. For me, it's, you know, like taking opium.
Oh, yeah, I was actually going to ask you. So what happens if you eat a lot of carbs?
Well, for one thing, it vastly aggravates my epilepsy. Because yay, that comes with the package. It's a genetic problem.
Wow.
I feel sluggish. It's hard to stay awake. I'm more prone to illness. It does. Getting too much carbs is really bad for my immune system.
Mm.
It's basically like hitting me with poisonous depressants. My mood isn't good because I don't feel good. And like I said, there is nothing quite as motivating to make you control your diet as allergies and epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that causes you, intense trauma and pain will modify your behavior in short order. So yeah, for me, in my case, I literally could not be a vegetarian or live on the sort of Mediterranean carb-rich or like Southeast Asian rice-rich diet. Couldn't do it. I'd be dead already.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get a little bit twitchy or a little bit irritable when people try to say, oh, it's immoral to eat the diet that actually keeps me alive. And so I don't have long conversations with people about how morally superior they are because they don't eat what I do.
Right.
It becomes a very short conversation. It's like, oh, really? Watch this. then
it's interesting. I mean,
they start meeting that other guy that people don't like as much.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because my girlfriend is pretty much vegetarian. She says that she's partially vegetarian, like for whatever cycles. I mean, she's a Vietnamese Buddhist, so there's certain cycles where they, like during the Buddha time, where they don't eat meat. She's a vegetarian, but that's pretty much all the time. It seems like, and now it's gotten to the point where her body just kind of rejects meat. Like if she eats meat, she gets sick. So for her, I can completely understand having a vegetarian diet. And so, like when she comes over, we eat foods that are just, not meat, or I'll have a meat dish and she'll have a vegetarian dish.
Yeah. And that's a function of evolution and action.
Mm-hmm.
That's a function of heredity. That's not a function of your value systems at some point. At some point, you just have to admit that we're not all identical.
Mm-hmm.
We're all morally equivalent, but that doesn't mean we're identical. Humanity spent enough thousands of years in different environments to partially adapt to those environments.
Mm-hmm.
If it had gone on for another 50,000 years or 100,000 years, we might have had different human subspecies. It didn't go on that long, but the process was underway. People in the Arctic were separated from people in Southeast Asia for 50,000 years almost.
Right.
And for an omnivore, that's plenty of time for the adaptation process to begin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 35,000 years anyway.
Yeah. And we adapt very quickly to our environment.
Yeah. So, so I think part of our protections as a society that's full of people from lots of different places, and basically that's the whole world at this point, is you have to have that tolerance of other people being different from you because they are neurologically, metabolically, perceptually. Different people whose eyes come from different parts of the world respond to light differently, or different eye colors may respond to light differently. So I think you have to allow that exists at various variables and levels through the whole population.
Yeah.
And the more
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the more people then begin to reintegrate from one culture or one far-flung corner of the earth to the other, the more wacky that mix is going to get, because you'll have someone with one Arctic trait, one tropical trait, one plainsman's trait, one mountain person's trait, because you're going to be getting this mix filtering down through the generations as humanity reintegrates. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to be more careful to allow individualism.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I can't remember exactly where I heard or read, but there was this idea that the blue in eyes, especially in European eyes, came from the reflective surface of the snow. It was a way of filtering out light in some way. So that's why blue eyes are so prevalent among Europeans. as opposed to other cultures like in Asia or southern parts of the world don't have blue eyes. They tend to have darker eyes.
Well, that sounds like somebody made a nice try to explain it, but that's not the actual explanation. Blue eyes actually evolved in Spain among dark.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the oldest example of the blue-eyed genes. That's because there's only the one strain of blue eyes. It gets mixed. They're not all the same blue, but it actually comes from dark-skinned people living in Spain 7,000 years ago. That's the oldest genetically verified example of blue eyes. Mm-hmm. So those people were living and are related to the Tuareg of West Central Africa. The Tuareg in West Central Africa are like half of them are blue-eyed, and they live in the desert.
Oh, okay.
But the people then migrated from Spain across Europe over to the Black Sea. And then migrated with their whatever percentage of people with blue eyes, migrated up to Finland, where they worked out really well for them because blue eyes happen to be good in low light. That's the real physiologically where blue eyes have the advantage and disadvantage of they react to changes in light slower, but they react more completely. Brown eyes react quickly, but not as completely. So depending on whether you're trying to drive through, run through a forest with the light dappling, you want brown eyes for that. But if you're out on the plains at night in the Arctic, the blue eyes will serve you better, relatively speaking, given individual variation. But that's the actual genetic and medical history of that. Scandinavians started out as brown-skinned people in Spain. They started out that way 7,000 years ago, according to actual genetic tests.
Okay, so blue eyes are a benefit to people who live in the northern part of the world?
Just because the light's lower.
Okay.
And if you have to be out at night. But they're not good if someone shines a flashlight in your eyes. You know what I mean? So if you're somewhere where the sun is bright and you're going from light to shade to light to shade, if you've got the most extreme version of the blue-eyed thing, you're blind the whole time because your eyes are constantly basically having a flashlight shoved in your face. It sucks for me. I hate being out on sunny days. Get me out at night in the forest when it's cloudy and I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's levels of that, but that's the actual medical or physiological difference between the way, and when indoors in modern society, with street lights, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference because we've provided artificial illumination everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe the thing that I read didn't go back that far, and it started off at the point of in the northern part of the world, blue eyes were more beneficial, but maybe it just didn't go far enough to talk about the origins of it. So it was just talking about it was good for that type of environment.
It's a subject that's been of interest to me, so I've tried to keep up on things like the Human Genome Project and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of information has only come out in the last few years. If you saw something that was published 20 years ago, it's all been eclipsed.
Yeah.
Everything's been turned over by the new genetic research. The archaeologists have been pissed off for they had all these theories about where these people came from, and then some asshole comes along, takes some blood samples, and says, "Oh yeah, these people went from here to here to here to here this many years ago, and that's what happened." And that's absolutely undeniable science because biochemistry is just solid. And so the archaeologists had to completely redraw the history of North and South America and tribal migrations.
Well, because all of our history was based upon linguistics, culture, or pretty much culture, linguistics.
Yeah, some arrowheads you found in the ground.
Right. Yeah, and then certain styles of pottery or certain this, and so they start breaking up all these cultures into various things. So yeah, I can see how the actual genetics would probably not jive with that, because I'm sure that people have been exploring and intermarrying for thousands and thousands, well, millions of years, you know, not just, you know, who lives this side of the Mediterranean and who has this artistic style on their pottery, you know?
Yeah, because it turns out that you know, and a lot of the archaeology was dependent on the idea that people and products didn't move around that much in the ancient world.
Mm-hmm.
And then they themselves discovered, oh my God, people and products in the ancient world really moved around a lot.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
found,
look at there's a, oh shoot, what's it called? But there's so much, especially like you look at some of the Celtic artwork that they found, and there's this one beautiful torque that was actually from Crete. It was a Greek in origin, but it was this mixture of Greek and Celtic style. And
right. Turns out some guy took a trip and got inspired to make some new art.
yeah, I mean, it could be that, or it could be that just there's more interaction between cultures than we realize.
Right. Oh, in general, yeah.
You know?
The Western world has had to. It had the old style of historical mapping got thrown right out the window when they started to realize just how good as sailors people like the Phoenicians were.
Right. Exactly.
And it turns out, oh wait, the Phoenicians were sailing all the way around Africa in 700 BC because they could. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, there's a lot of blending. Or like in the Arctic, there's a tribe called the Chukchi. If I can ever get the ch and the k straight, but the Chukchi, who are traditional Arctic Ocean sailors in Asia. Well, they camps of their people with their artifacts, boat remains, whatever, have been found in Greenland. So these people were sailing from Asia all the way around to Greenland in ancient times prior to contact with Indo-Europeans. Mm-hmm. And their shamanic drums had star charts on them.
Right.
And so this has made the whole archaeology a lot more confusing to try to derive it from that. But then, like I said, the guys come around and take samples and do the DNA mapping, and they did it soon enough that they could still find people who weren't already from super mixed families. And they kind of said, yeah, 18,000 years ago, people from here went there, and 12,000 years ago, people from there went there. You go do your archaeology now. Now you have a timeline.
Right.
and mostly they found out that people in ancient times moved around a lot, and small groups of them would balloon up into huge populations, the way people do.
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, this has been great, Animus. We actually went an hour longer than I had anticipated, but I know that we also started sort of late too, because I had my sound all screwed up.
as long as we're all having fun.
Yeah.
And I gotta get my medicine anyway.
Yeah, I gotta get going too. I gotta get something to eat. But Witchy Jim just reminded me, and I was gonna mention it earlier, but I'm gonna go and on Friday, he and I are gonna have a hangout on his channel. So definitely go and check him out. I think it's gonna be Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Let me know if I got that time right, Witchy Jim. But so that should be fun. That should be interesting. I think he's been in one of my hangouts before. I'm trying to remember. But anyhow, so it'll be on his channel. So definitely go and check that out. That'll be this Friday at 6 p.m. So that'll be exciting. And it was good to hang out with you again, Animus. I know it's been a long time.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I know I said that I think I had originally thought about doing a Patreon hangout at the first week of every month.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it kind of, it didn't really work out too well for me, so I had to like move it back. I'm thinking probably maybe towards the end of the month is when I'll do the hangouts.
Okay, well, I'll catch it if I can.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, usually like I posted it in Patreon, so hopefully you'll see it there. But if not, I always send.
I never go and look at that site unless I get a message or something. But at least I know to go look at it.
Yeah.
Because I don't I'm not that network savvy anymore. These people have all these accounts on all these different platforms. It's like, how do you get anything else done? You've got Twitter and Facebook and thing and this other thing and the thing with the chat and the Snap and I can't do it. I can't talk to my squirrels, man.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have Facebook, I have YouTube and Twitter, and I think that's it. I have a Tumblr that I don't tumble. Okay, I'm not tumbling. I also have Instagram. I'm not gramming. I'm not tumbling.
Yeah, I know that I don't have space in my head to try to juggle that many social. I'm just not that social. This is pretty much YouTube here is pretty much the limit of my network social life. Other than that, I've got other things that I have to pay attention to, but not that they're all that any more important than anyone else's, but they take up a lot of my time. Yeah. And I have a limited tolerance for being around other people.
You prefer the squirrels, huh?
Well, the squirrels have got their own thing going on that doesn't affect me, you know. So, but you know, that's just my thing. But I'm also turning into kind of an old man hermit.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is my big night out.
Yeah, I think that just sort of naturally happens. So, all right. Well, hey, thanks, Animus. Thanks everybody in the chat. It was a lot of fun, and I will probably have another random hangout sometime during the week. Just kind of like just have a hangout. So maybe I'll do that some other time, but it'll be kind of random. I'm not going to plan it. So
all right, we'll just see who's online at the time.
Exactly. All righty, Animist, take care, and everybody in the chat, take care, and have a good night.
Have a good one, everyone.